Welcome to the Revenue Café. The Revenue Café podcast is brought to you by Breadcrumbs, the revenue acceleration platform. In each episode, we will bring you interesting conversations on all things sales, marketing, and CX related. The hope is we will help you along the path to revenue acceleration and entertain you along the way.
Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode. This week, we're really lucky to be joined by Sam Hunter from Driveroo. We're going to be talking about all things sales as usual. Going to be taking a little bit of a deep dive into COVID and the realities of that on business. Sam, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
No problem, man. Thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. Sam, just for the benefit of everybody listening, maybe you can give us a little bit of a 30-second pitch on Driveroo.
Yeah, Driveroo is a fleet management software app that really focuses in on the vehicle inspection piece. So we have a application platform where businesses can digitize their entire process from inspections for pre-trip, post-trip, fully customizable. And we do it with a graphic interface. It's called TurboGrafx that we've created that allows anybody to pick up the app from 7 years old to 70 and use it without any type of training. So really helping take a space where there's a ton of paper around and eliminate the paper.
Cool. And so if they want to find you, it's driveroo.com, I guess?
Yep, driveroo.com.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
Sam and I were talking before we actually started recording. We were talking about the transition he's had from his previous companies to Driveroo that has more of like a trial freemium approach to user acquisition compared to like hardcore outbound driving sales demand. Do you want to talk a little bit about that transition and how you found it? It sounds like you're happy about it. So
yeah. So like right out of first job, leaving school was call center based, and I mean $100 a day. Really, you get someone on the phone. It's a celebration within itself. So I've kind of had that as my entire history in sales. I mean, even when I moved to doing outside sales, I'd spend a week pounding the phones, trying to get people on the phone and then schedule meetings. They don't show for meetings. So now moving to this, the assisted sales approach, I just look at my calendar and I'm booked to talk to people and show demos. So I'm like, this is weird. I'm trying to explain to the CEO to everyone, like, you guys don't get it. Like, I've never had people just asking me for things, except for when I worked at Circuit City in like 1999.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's definitely like, it's one of the benefits of SaaS in general, right? The fact that the inbound motion is kind of like the de facto. Obviously, when you're like super new, sometimes you're still, in the case of Breadcrumbs, we're only a year old at this point. And, we're building that inbound muscle and calendars are starting to get filled up, which is great. But we're still like, dialing because we got to grow that business. It's actually, I think it's a great way to get, obviously you have a huge appreciation for the inbound leads that are coming your way. I think it's a great way to teach reps that it can be way harder, right?
Well, you know what? I think the most refreshing part about all of that to me is the fact that it's instant validation for what we do, right? Like I'm not like calling somebody and trying to like pitch them on what we do and that it works. People have sought us out. So, I mean, that's even to me, when I'm start to bring on the sales team, if that doesn't instill confidence that, all right, people are looking for this. So now it's easier for you to call on some of these larger accounts and things like that, because we know the needs there and, people obviously like our solution. So.
Cool. Well, Sam, one of the things we've been kind of focusing on in these conversations is how the world has changed from, early last year to today. I think we're all aware of the COVID reality. I think some people are actually kind of sick of talking about the COVID reality. But it's a thing. It's definitely impacted like how we work, where we work, if we work, unfortunately, for some people. Any kind of like major, observations or learning around the impacts of COVID to your, to sales?
Yeah, for me, March, I think I left a restaurant conference in Vegas on like March 12th. And the conference was kind of like bare bones, it's just starting to really get out where people are starting to cancel and things like that. And then when I landed back here in Phoenix, walking to my car, I get like the ESPN pop up that the NBA is like canceling. And that was like first domino. And then it went from, I had these trips planned to was going to California to meet with customers, and everything within like a week shut down. Being in the restaurant industry, it was just the level of uncertainty just put a, damper on obviously everything. And then also the company was heavily in casinos. So it's like all revenue basically stopped for a second. So for me, just kind of when that happened, it was like, all right, we're facing things no one's ever seen. So obviously we really haven't prepared for it, and kind of getting a little kick in the butt to be like, all right, what can I do? Right. Like, I mean, these industries are going to have to shift. People like these business owners, the consumers, everyone's going to have to do something different because we're all uncomfortable. And I think like that, part of that was a benefit because, right, we're uncomfortable. So we grow, and it forced a lot of people to start, investing in technology to keep their businesses open. Unfortunately, there were other people who decided to put that on the back burner though, because revenues and things were down. So it's like, we just have to keep the lights on. But I think that the whole 2020, I think that, a lot of us will be better for having faced that adversity, opposed to just, everything is great all the time, get new skills, everything.
Yeah. So obviously, you've shifted into a different industry. The space that you're in has probably been positively impacted by COVID, right? Like Amazon's delivering more packages than ever, like food still got to get to the grocery store. So that was likely a consequence of the COVID situation. But in terms of like how that's impacted how you sell or how you interact with your prospects / customers, any kind of major things there?
So right now, no, and I mean, taking it from like March till now, the better part of last year selling, into restaurants and things of that nature, definitely, right? Like what, we're adding all types of different safety precautions and additions to our software to be able to, help these guys move as quickly as they can to navigate staying open and making sure they got everything in place. To some of the challenges that Driveroo had faced before I even got there was dealing with a very, very, very large school transportation, school bus opportunity, and then boom, schools are shut down. So they were like, oh no. And then slowly you start to see the rise of this Amazon thing, right? And then it's like, okay, well, here's a potential, market. And then that just kind of boomed. So it was like, all right, well, now these guys are using it. It's allowing them to get the software better and take a lot of the recommendations from those customers. So then when I come in now, some of these things are starting to loosen. So all the kind of building that they were doing through the whole COVID thing, I've been able to kind of capitalize on right when I've come in. And like you said, right, like, who'd have thought everyone would lose their jobs and everything would like go in the tank, and then consumer spending goes up. So so there's stuff shipping and everything. So we are definitely starting to reap the benefits of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's an interesting observation. I was just having a conversation with a good friend of mine last night about how kind of conventional wisdom around a lot of things seems to have evaporated due to COVID, right? Like, housing prices, at least here in Canada, they're like exploding, even though like we're starting to see interest rates go up, and usually there's like an inverse relationship there, right? Or savings, like people are saving more money than ever.
And spending, like, it's crazy, right?
And spending, yeah.
So one of the things like I started doing, right? So April, I'm like, all right, here come the pay cuts and all this stuff is coming down everywhere, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of a one-trick pony right now, right? And I've got a little bit more time on my hands because there's no one answering phones anywhere. I got to do something. So I started just not necessarily thinking about it, but I'm like, I'm invested in myself right now, right? I got to start figuring some things out. So I had like LLC with, I was going to like sell sneakers at one point in time. I dig this thing up, get this plug, start like selling masks online. It was like, oh, wow. Like I'm watching, this is where I got my YouTube education and everything. Right. From that, then I get into the market. So I just fall in love with stock charts, and I've, just got totally like all day. I'm watching everything. And that's when I was like, whoa, I'm starting to like see, and I'm thinking I should have been doing this stuff when I was like in high school, because this is amazing.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm seeing like, okay, well, I can start to sell a little bit better. Like I'm knowing what's happening with some of these restaurants. I'm now in some of these blogs. I'm hearing about things I was never even plugged into before. And that's when I was really like, Tesla keeps going up and they don't really sell a whole lot of cars. That was like the first thing I was like, what is happening? You know, like who has money to buy iPhones? Like Apple just keeps flying, but everyone is supposedly not working, you know, like, and it's like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening that's just weird.
Oh, 100%. It's, you know, I used to think I had a pretty good pulse on like economics in general, market forces, how things kind of work. But like I've stopped thinking that because I don't get it.
Go public, have no product, you know, $15 billion valuation, stocks $90 a share. Been in business for 35 years, set record numbers, and at your earnings call, and you're going to drop 5%.
Right. Yeah. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. So have you seen, you know, let's extend that conversation a little bit. Have you seen any kind of weird buying behavior or weird like decision-making processes on the B2B side that kind of weren't there before?
Not necessarily weird, but I mean, it was so difficult, you know, for the last part of 2020, just even, you know, getting some conversations going at places. And then the people that were still looking to, you know, improve food safety and, you know, things of that nature, with what I was doing through the part of 2020 was just like, they already had it on their to-do list. And because things had slowed down, they were like, okay, you know, we're going to start looking at some of this stuff to do. So I thought it was kind of weird to see how the businesses kind of reacted to having that downtime. It's like, did they curl up and just say, oh no, like, what are we going to do? Shut everything down? Or did they say, all right, we're going to like take this time and get creative and say, all right, hey, everybody's working from home. The office is down. You know, those projects that we've been putting off, let's start knocking those out. And when I saw businesses do things like that, that kind of was like, all right, well, I kind of do what I'm doing just at home, you know, like let's figure out some different things that we can do to get better, because, you know, I think that's going to be what's going to be telling for 2021 is how many of these people continue with that or how many just fall right back into where they were in 2019. You know?
Yeah, that's funny. So like we're skipping ahead a little bit. That's usually kind of one of my last questions, but like, you know, we're a quarter into 2021. COVID is like a reality. We're way more familiar with what's going on. And I think a lot of the, you know, fear is probably dissipated a little bit. Now it's just kind of the nuances. You know, in the COVID area, we've had all of these like, you know, social and political things happen as well. You know, how do you think that translates into 2021? Do you think there's going to be like continuing impacts of COVID? Do you think there's going to be new big trends? What's your prediction, I guess, for 2021?
I have, you know, I don't know if I have a prediction. Like, I mean, I guess like whatever I predict is going to be the opposite, you know, what everything else has been going, right?
Yeah.
But I think for me, it's more of like, I have a lot of like hopes as to what you know, happens. And, you know, I think that that we will have a lot of businesses who, you know, might not have been really into, you know, into tech and into things like that. They got that kick in the butt from COVID, and they're going to say, hey, you know what? Let's continue expanding that. Let's keep these conversations going. What else can we do? It's like, you know what? We don't really need to go to the office, or we don't really need to travel necessarily to have some of these meetings. You know, that money that we're saving here, maybe we can start investing that and, you know, doing some other things to make the business more efficient. So I'm hoping to see that. And, you know, that kind of cuts right back into Driveroo and what we do. It's like, we need to make your business more efficient, right? Like we're going to put money back in your pocket. It's going to, you know, basically free up tons of hours of people's time from whatever they're doing now, surrounded around their inspection process and maintenance. Now that you've, you know, been through a terrible time, let's use what you learned there and move it forward to help your business be better in 2021, 2022. I think that this kind of like how I did, like taking my old sneaker LLC and then started selling masks. You got a lot of new entrepreneurs out there, and we see that a lot with these Amazon DSPs, which we heavily deal with. And these guys people are coming in. These men, women, everybody from like every background I talk to that's now got DSPs from 2-3 vehicles to 50-60 vehicles, and Amazon's looking to continue to blow that up. And
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just so for people that aren't familiar, DSP is delivery service partner.
Yes, delivery. Yep. Delivery service provider for Amazon. So I remember getting this email in like 2019 from them. It's like, start your own Amazon delivery service for $10,000. And, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And now there's tons of them out there. So a lot of these people, though, by them being new business owners, some of them, they're not really like, hey, we're just going to keep this pen and paper thing. They want to do it right from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I find that to be refreshing.
So it's funny there. Like one of the things I'm hearing there is like this idea of like gig entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. Like the gig economy has been a thing for a while, right? Yep. And lots of like pros and cons on both sides of that argument of whether that's a good thing that's kind of happened as a result of these big tech companies or not so good. I do think an interesting evolution is people that see the opportunity for like gig entrepreneurship, right? Where they might have 3, 4, 5 different things going on, but it's like, it's their thing. They're in control. They're deciding where they spend their time, where they don't spend their time, as opposed to like, just jumping in an Uber to deliver food or, doing Favor or some other app as like a gig economy thing, but more of like the gig entrepreneurship thing.
And so like,
not that there's anything wrong with delivering Uber, by the way. I don't want anybody like.
Well, I'm from Detroit originally. So, my dad worked for Ford, sisters at GM, sisters' husbands at GM. Like it's a very, automotive focused landscape. And that is a very worker style mentality. You have your guaranteed pay, your insurance and things like that. And the concepts of some of this stuff, like just blow my parents' mind. Like, mm-hmm. What do you mean you're a contract worker? Like, how do you get paid? I'm like, well, they pay my LLC. Well, how do you get the money? I'm like, Mom, it's like a 30-minute conversation with my mom.
Sure, yeah.
So I find it to be super refreshing, even just from the negative connotation of the gig work. I don't necessarily like it because what's different from like a serial entrepreneur just because their companies are worth billions of dollars or whatever? It's all the same. They're starting their own thing and doing it. And I feel like the negative connotation comes from those that don't want that to happen, right? Like people, they're workers, they want the control. But what we're seeing with everything in our economy and just the country and the world is people are taking back control. They're looking to take control in all different types of ways. But I mean, the hey, I'm just happy to show up and get a paycheck is not going to be, the way moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. I think you and I could swap some interesting stories around, like explaining stuff to parents. My parents are immigrants to Canada, so I'm a first generation Canadian, and they worked regular jobs, not 9 to 5, more like 6 to 9. Yeah, 6 in the morning, 9 at night for my entire life to give me a better opportunity. And just before starting Breadcrumbs, I had a VP level job at an established company, and I tell them, hey, I'm leaving that to start my own business. They think it's like lunacy, right? Yeah. Like it just does not resonate with them. But it's a generation, for me, it's like a cultural and generational shift in terms of like how you look at work and, the fulfillment it brings you beyond just the paycheck.
For sure. And quote unquote security, right? Like that's always paycheck security.
I think it's like there's a different, it's funny because I think we live in like really cynical times, quite honestly, like, and to a certain extent, we've like oversimplified the world into like camps. So there's like a lack of nuance. Yeah. So there's a lot of things in the current state of the world that like don't rub me the right way. But one of the things that does is that really like most individuals still have this like optimism, and almost like a greater optimism than previous generations, I would say. And I think that's what one of the things that drove me to take the entrepreneurial jump is, I'm optimistic about what I can do and what business I can build and the value I can bring to the world and the jobs that I can create. And I have optimism about that. Yeah. Whereas I think previous generations, maybe it was either a lack of optimism or greater fear, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know what the balance is there, but lots of people focus on what's wrong with the world today. I and I have opinions, don't get me wrong, but I'd like to focus on that idea that people are just generally more optimistic about their lives, right?
Yeah, I definitely, and going back to the whole gig economy thing, I mean, you don't, that in itself to me creates that optimism a little bit. I mean, it adds to it. Like one of my best friends, he got laid off, like in Michigan, if you don't work for the auto manufacturer, you work for a company that supplies these auto manufacturers.
Right. Yeah.
Goes hand in hand. And, he was able to, hop in and Lyft it and Uber it and DoorDash it to keep everything going, and it's like when you have these things that you can kind of fall back on where those opportunities weren't there before. So, I mean, it kind of makes it just everything a little bit more like in your grasp, like, oh, well, I would look at, the founder of the Johnson & Johnson family. All right, that's impossible. I'm not in that family, but I can look at now all these different guys like yourself, right? Like, well, I don't have to answer anybody else. I can just kind of start my own thing and keep it moving. So yeah, I think that is really opening up like that dream to people.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that.
And the cynicism, right? I mean, I tell my parents, I'm like, everything you've ever like criticized or told me not to do or like whatever, I would be like a multi-millionaire now if I would have just bought all these video games and never opened them. And all my basketball cards. And you told me Bitcoin was stupid.
Right.
Nobody's going to buy a car from the shopping mall. Like, literal conversation. So now I got my parents like going through all my like closets, found a video game in the closet used. It's worth like $700. I mean, it's just, things are totally different,
Yeah. It's insane. And maybe I'm showing my age a little bit, but I had a bunch of those experiences as well. And like now some of these like newer trends, right? Like this, I don't know if you've been following like NFTs as a trend.
I'm an early adopter.
Right. So like a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago shows me, I think it's called NBA Top Shots.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I'm like, so he's opening up a package. We're looking at some of the video clips and I'm like, hold on, you paid money for this? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And here's a bunch of other ones that I've bought that are already worth more. And I'm like, you can't just like YouTube this? He's like, nope. Well, which is like, I'm still wrapping my head around this world.
So let me jump right in there. So I'm a sneakerhead, right?
Okay.
And all of this to me has just been built off of a lot of this sneaker culture and the scarcity of things. Like, we know sneakers are a thing that are scarce, but it's still kind of like accessible to most people. Like, you got to get lucky, right? But like art, for instance, isn't accessible to most people if it's, it's expensive. So, I mean, you can literally just take anything now and say, hey, this is a 1-1 or it's a 1 in 10 and apply a value to it. And somebody's going to try and buy it, because well, this coaster, there's only 3 of these left ever.
Right.
Like, because my boy, he goes, well, I mean, what do you do with it? I'm like, what do you do with the Picasso? Hangs on your wall. Like, you don't really do anything with it. It's just there. Like, you own it.
Yeah, no, that's funny. I have a mental gap though, in terms of like the physical to the digital, right? Like, the art or like the old, back in the old days, you get a sports card and like you put it in the protective casing and but you own it, right? You hold it, you can experience it. Mm-hmm. Like now it's just in the ether. Right? Yeah. Like it's something in the ether and people are ascribing value to it. And it just amazes me that, that the intangibleness of value, right? Sure. Like right?
Who says it's worth that? Like I had
Right.
that conversation over the summer with friends on like Bitcoin and things like that. Well, it's like it's just like your house. It's worth whatever somebody's going to pay for it. So, like we also ultimately have that say, and that back to like Tesla. It's like, well, who says Tesla's worth that? Well, people are putting money into it, right? But based on like what, we can GameStop anything.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's actually like one of the funny things is like, I've had some conversations with other entrepreneurs about this concept and this trend and how it relates to like what we do, right? Like selling SaaS, selling the prices that we ascribe to things. I've always been like a believer that most early SaaS companies make the mistake of undervaluing what they're delivering to the market, like setting their prices too low.
Yep.
And because it's like literally it's about what is the perceived value to someone else?
For sure.
Right. And, if you look at your total addressable market, whatever it is, not to turn this into like a geeky business thing, but whatever your total addressable market is, within that group of, let's call it 1 million buyers, there's going to be a segment that will value your product 4 times more than some other segment. Right. And so like, what do? Do you try and find those people that are willing to pay 4 times more? It's way smaller, but you're making way more money per account, and like you can service them better and it costs you less to run your business? Or do you like find like the path of least resistance across like the broadest swath and sell as much of this as you possibly can? It's actually an interesting conversation, I find. And especially when you start talking about it in like, my buddy just spent $900 on 6 video clips, like it's crazy.
It definitely is. And like one question I always like to, ask when I used to do this when I was like really on the phones, like selling and stuff. And, you pitch your stuff and then, someone says, oh, it's too expensive. Compared to what? Like, like I and I'm not saying it like to be smart, but I really want to know how in your head you are perceiving the value. Like, is it everybody else I've talked to is cheaper, or I just don't think your solution, your product is worth that much money? But people like there's a preconceived value there that we just assign to things. Now, as we see with these NFTs and stuff like that, well, they're just coming out right now, and as the early adopters are in, they're just coming back and saying, "Hey, this is what it's worth." So, you and I, we don't even get to make up our mind if it's too expensive.
Right? Yeah.
There's the value. So, it's
that's cool. Do you find, getting I could talk about like NFTs and all this craziness all day, but getting back to kind of the core sales thing, do you find price is a relatively easy thing to overcome, or if somebody's hung up on price, it's a pretty good sign that it's not going to be a good deal?
I've always found price most of the time would be what we would call like a smoke screen objection. Due to the fact it's like one of the like easier ones, I guess, for people just to kind of throw out there. But for me, it's always been like, why? Like if I dig down those whys, I'm going to get to like the root of the problem, right? So it's like, hey, that's you're too expensive. Okay. Compared to what, right? Your competitors are here. Okay. Well, like, can we have that conversation to break down maybe some of the differences or the nuances? And, if it gets to a thing to where, hey, I've got a budget that I've been approved and this is all I can do, that's like a legitimate price thing. Now I change my price to make it work, pull back features or whatever the situation is. But like a B2C relationship, though, a lot of times, I mean, there's typically something else there. You have a problem, I have a solution. So, let's figure out, if you just don't see the value in what I offer, then, maybe I need to go back and figure out what's wrong with my product.
Right.
And then come back at that price. But a lot of times for me, though, price is just, we can get through that. There's something typically bigger there for
Yeah. I think, obviously I think the B2C side, there's a larger amount of emotion in any purchasing decision there. Not to say that B2B is like bereft of emotion. It's not. Like there's still an emotional component, right? Like, you know, you build good rapport with your prospect. They like you. They want to do right by you, or, you know, they have an affinity to your founding story, or they just like your brand, or like there's those elements. I just find it's less of a factor than B2C, right? Like
for sure.
B2C people, they like a brand, they see something they like, price almost becomes completely irrelevant, right? Like the price is not a factor.
Well,
the interesting thing is, how do you like, and I haven't cracked this nut, right? I've been marketing for many, many years, but like one of the interesting things that I always think about is, how do I get my B2B buyer to feel about my company the way they feel about Nike or Volkswagen or, you know, Gucci, whatever brand that they love, right? Any thoughts there?
I always try to, for me, you know, no matter what it is we're selling, right, we're trying to solve some sort of problem, right? That's why we're on the phone with these people, or they've reached out, we've got these meetings set, they have a problem, and we think that we have the solution. I find it, no matter if from the biggest company to the smallest company or to the individual buyer, whatever, when people have like this perceived value of like our services that we offer them, that it's not really, a lot of times, no matter how like complex you think this other companies you're dealing with or whatever, it could be Apple or whatever, sometimes they don't know why that they have these things, right? Like, it's like, well, look, your service is too expensive. Well, okay, well, let's look at your labor that we're going to save you here. Let's look at what we're changing here. Like, they haven't necessarily taken all those steps, right? So I feel like if I can come in with like a sales process that identifies like, it doesn't cost you money. We're saving you money. We're putting it right back into your pocket, and show them things that they haven't seen, that will change how they view me. Because, you know, there's always a like stereotypical way that, you know, you come into the conversation, all right, these guys are going to pitch me this, whatever.
Yeah.
Come in there and say, hey, well, did you know that you're losing money here, that this is happening here, that your employees are doing this, or this, that, and the other? And they're like, ooh, well, I didn't really know that. So now I've separated myself out. You know, I'm the Gucci of this. You know what I'm saying? My sir. And if you, now price wise, you get back to price. If I'm priced similar to everybody else, and now I'm providing all this extra perceived value to them, now
yeah, for sure. Cool. You know, partway through the year, like the early part of the year, what are your like top priorities? What are you trying to accomplish this year, and how, and is that any different than you would have done it in the past?
Yeah, so I think I've really my number one thing has been just not necessarily like a business goal so much, but like more of like a personal thing. Like I want to invest in myself. Like, I've kind of made that choice to say, I am going to do and try and learn and do everything to make me a better me. Because me being a better me makes me a better me for like everybody around me, right? So, you know, I'm going to help my businesses better that I'm working with. I'm going to be better, like family, friend, like everything. So just kind of internally focus on that. And then, you know, learning as much as I can, right? Like, even with Driveroo, you know, very, very, very young company. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to sell everything I can. We're going to build this and everything, but I want to learn like things that I don't know about, going from seed to this, to that. Like I'm trying to expand, you know, just my skill sets and then acting on it. Right. So I've always kind of like had these grand ideas and like awesome things. And like most people, you just don't really do anything about them. So, prime example, like my best Thai restaurant I've ever been to in my life. It's like 5 seconds from my house. Go there all the time. Their point of sale system is archaic. It's super inconvenient. They don't have online ordering. You call, they have one phone line. It takes them forever. I've always thought, like I had a big POS background. I'm like, hey, I can help you guys fix this and drastically increase your sales. Like, there's been times I've called and haven't got through and didn't order from you guys. But I never acted on it. I just sucked it up or whatever. Pandemic hits. They're closed. And when they finally open back up, they've got online ordering. It's like, I could have set them up with this some years ago, and they
Right,
probably
right.
had to have closed. Like, I could have really probably impacted their business, or they
Yeah.
might have said, "You know what, we're not interested," but I never even made that action to find
Right,
out.
right.
So I'm definitely looking to act on just
Yeah.
everything now.
Well, listen, Sam. I personally, for what it's worth, the things I hear are music to my ears. Right, like the notion, like the notion of being self-aware, of caring about like helping others and helping others by improving yourself
Mhm.
is like a super refreshing take. Right, like I alluded to her earlier. I think a lot of people spend a lot of energy trying to find the people that are making things bad, right?
Yeah.
They spend a lot of time outwardly focused at making accusations and like very little time inwardly focused thinking about how do I be better and therefore make the world better. So like that attitude, man, I think that's a winning attitude, and it's gonna help you go places for sure.
Oh, thank you, man. I definitely appreciate it, because I mean, for me, it's just, when you look at successful people or just happy people and how they define this and that, it's hard for people to be like, oh, if I had $1 million, if I had $100 million, I wouldn't have problems. And it's like, well, no, like, it's you. Like, you are going to determine if if all this stuff is going to help you out, right? Like,
Yeah.
the people that win the lottery that go broke. It's like,
Oh, dude, that's one of my favorite shows.
oh,
There's like
dude,
these shows on TV that are like all these lottery winners and how they blew their money, and some of them do it twice.
you are who you are.
Yeah.
Like, the money doesn't change you. Like, it just,
Oh,
most of the
100%.
time, it's going to amplify who you
Well,
are.
how's the song go? More money, more problems, right?
Dude.
Like,
And it's like, because when you get, and like, yeah, because now you got money now. Oh, nobody really cared about you before, but now you've got people that come in here. They have agendas, this, that, and the other. And if you have any vices, right, then you're wide open. But I mean, people don't. My parents don't like when I say this, but it's like, when a lot of people are where they deserve to be
Mhm.
when it comes to how they are basically approaching their life, how they're approaching getting better, how they're, set here. Like, everyone's not meant to have $100 million,
Right.
right? Like, it takes a whole lot for somebody to get there. Like, there's
Right.
sacrifices, this, that. If it just falls in your lap, you're not prepared for it. That sacrifice to get there, a lot of times, is what builds that in you, that you can handle that responsibility. Not everyone's not made for that. Like, it's just
Right.
the way it is.
Well, literally, like, economics doesn't work that way.
Right.
Not everybody can have $100 million.
100%.
Right? Yeah. And I think you're right. Like, in everything, and I think you'll notice this about me, like I'm a firm believer in like nuance. Like, things aren't simplistic.
Nope.
I agree with this underlying principle that I think you're bringing across, which is like personal responsibility and personal accountability. Like, the decisions you make, the things you do, have a bearing on your life. There's the flip side to that, which is like there's a big component of whatever you want to call it, luck, serendipity, circumstance, that also plays a factor, right? Like, I can look back at my life and say, well, like this company, right? Like, the only reason this company exists, Breadcrumbs, is I ran into a former colleague randomly at a conference in Ireland, and we started talking, and all of a sudden we have a business idea, and like a few months later we have an actual company. That's a perfect example, right? There was some serendipity, there was some luck, but then there was the decisions, right?
Yeah. So, hey, I got one. I got a good one for you. I used to, so in college, I was a rapper, right? I was in a rap group, So I used to, like, I would describe this to, like, people. It's like, you have like these 8 Mile like fantasies where, you meet like somebody at Eminem or like a record executive, and they go ahead, rap. That could be the luckiest, best day of your life.
Yeah.
If you are prepared and you just got bars all day long. If you aren't prepared, it'd be the worst day of your life.
For sure.
So that's
for sure.
Like you just said, the personal responsibility piece, and where it just kind of goes back, be the best you. Like, if you've got something that you're trying to do and it's like your goal, go after it. Be prepared, because that lucky day could be an unlucky day, if
Yeah.
you aren't ready for it.
Yeah. And I guess the only, not to turn this into a self-help kind of web show, but the reality is like the best you is like not an end state, in my opinion.
Never.
Right. It's like a continuously evolving state.
Mm-hmm.
I think about me in my teens, I think about me in my 20s, I think about me in my 30s, and in every one of those decades I can point to like a bunch of bad decisions, right?
Yeah.
A bunch of things that like
Nice.
I wish I had done differently, but like I can't live regretting those, and I can't live thinking that there's this perfect state that I haven't attained, so I should just stop trying. I have to realize that it's just a continuous journey, right? And I'm going to make more mistakes along the way. As long as I don't repeat the same ones, I think, you're doing okay.
Not a loss, it's a lesson.
Right, exactly.
You gotta you learn from it, you grow from it. And, I think when we're younger, like the biggest thing is that, so I have a 2-year-old right now, and it's like, you have to like also at some point in time start to get that little bit of wisdom where it's like you got to start listening to people that did it. Like there's some mistakes, you definitely got to make for yourself, because that's really the only way you're gonna get it.
For sure.
But and just like having that appreciation, especially when you get to business and having mentors and that can kind of guide you. But the earlier you can start to adopt that type of mindset too, like let me hitch my wagon to somebody that's kind of done some of this stuff and help me maneuver. Like, I'm going to make some bad decisions. I need to learn, but also which ones can I not make that aren't going to like set me back big,
Right. Well, listen, and that's a great segue in terms of like wisdom, right? So, hopefully there's going to be a bunch of sales professionals, everywhere from like starting off my career as an SDR all the way to like I've been running teams for years, but all along that spectrum, there's things to learn, right? If you were to share like, 2 or 3 things that you've learned along the way that have helped you in your career, what do you think those would be?
Oh man. There are quite a few. I would say like when I left Michigan State and went to work at Quicken Loans, that probably was the biggest area of me learning things that like shaped how I view a lot of the stuff today. And, at the time, I wasn't necessarily taking heed to any of this stuff, but then, you get older and you can look back and be like, oh, now I get it. This is what we do, right? Like where my old boss used to always say, like, I don't coach effort, I will, and I've kind of put that into my toolkit to where, not to be on the self-help thing, but I like to, when I bring in someone I'm going to coach and work with for sales on my team, it's for me to help you get better, right? Like going from SDR to running teams and all that, like that could be your ultimate goal, but it couldn't be your ultimate goal. This could just be a job, right? It could just be a way that you're getting by to pay for something else. Well, what is that something else that you're trying to pay for? What is your passion? So I always try to find that with the people that I work with, and then let's figure out how we're going to make your time here help you get to where you ultimately need to be. Because now I can make it that this isn't just a job. It's like this is not necessarily a career, but it's something that's boosting you to be, what you want to be.
Sure. Yeah.
So taking that and then just saying like, the one thing I won't be able to do though is like help you pick up the phone and dial it. Like you're going to have to have that piece of it. I'll help you with everything else. That, and then also just, I think some of the wisdom, I mean, just in business and in sales, just having like the basis of integrity with your selling process and dealing with other people. My father-in-law, he's Australian, and I hate salespeople. So, there's this connotation that comes along with that, but it's like, I don't really sell you anything, right? You're going to tell me a problem and I'm going to help you fix the problem, and sometimes you might buy something from me to fix the problem, or sometimes, you won't. Maybe I'll just arm you with the information that you need and move forward. But having that integrity and that trust, again, I think it's one of those like building blocks that you when you're dealing with people of the past, and then you never know when they're going to come back up. You never know when that client that you didn't sign is going to go to a different company, and now they're going to come back to you because of how, you treated them, and how employees that you may have had as an SDR, and they, had this grand idea and you helped them, and then boom, you look up 5-6 years later, they have their own business, and now they want to bring you on. You just have to, I think, treat people right, and it just goes a very, very long way.
For sure. I agree with that entirely. Well, listen, Sam, we talked about all kinds of stuff. Hopefully whoever's listening to this thing enjoys the conversation about NFTs and the random connections we made to business. But super enjoyed the conversation. I really appreciate it. For everyone listening out there, if you manage a fleet of vehicles and you want to make your life easier, please check out Driveroo.com. You can get in touch with Sam at Driveroo.com directly.
Yep.
Or feel free to reach out to me at Breadcrumbs, and I'm happy to make the introduction. Thanks again for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode. Sam, once again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Thanks for listening the full episode. Make sure you subscribe the social media links below. For a more detailed info about what we do, take a look at breadcrumbs.com.